They told him she would die without a transplant. Not someday. Not eventually. Soon. That was the word the doctor used. And when a word like that enters a room, everything else becomes irrelevant. If you believe love should have limits, stay with this story until the end. Because this is what happens when it doesn't. The diagnosis came quietly, not in an emergency room, not in the middle of chaos. It came in a clean office with neutral colors and practiced voices. Kidney failure. Advanced. Progressive. She had been tired for months. Losing weight. Bruising easily. She had ignored it. So had he. Until the numbers on the screen removed all doubt. The doctor didn't dramatize it. He didn't have to. Her body was shutting down. Dialysis could slow it. Medication could buy time. But without a transplant, the outcome was inevitable. She looked at him when the word inevitable was spoken. Not with fear, with something closer to resignation. The waiting list was long. Years long. She didn't have years. They tested him out of routine. Compatibility checks, blood work, scans. Neither of them expected the results. Perfect match. The doctor paused when he said it, as if measuring the weight of what came next. You don't have to decide now, he added carefully. But everyone in the room knew that wasn't true. Time had already started running. She didn't cry. That was what unsettled him most. She sat still, hands folded, eyes focused somewhere behind the doctor's shoulder. When they were alone later, she finally spoke. "I won't let you do this," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled. "You shouldn't give up part of your life for me." She said it like a statement, not a plea, not a test. He believed her. That was his first mistake. The surgery wasn't simple. No transplant ever is. They explained the risks to him in precise language. Permanent limitations, reduced physical resilience, increased long-term health risks. Once it's gone, it's gone. You don't get it back. He signed anyway. He told himself that bodies were just containers, that love mattered more than function, that a life saved was worth any cost. The day of the surgery, she squeezed his hand before they wheeled her away. "You don't have to be a hero," she said. He smiled. He wasn't trying to be, he just didn't know how to walk away. She recovered faster than expected. That was the miracle everyone focused on. Her body accepted the kidney. Her color returned. Her strength followed. Within months, she was laughing again, eating normally, planning. He recovered slower. Pain lingered. Energy didn't return the way the doctors had predicted. He tired easily, had to change his routine, had to say no to things he never imagined refusing. But he never complained. Because how do you complain about saving someone's life? He watched her become herself again, and in the beginning, that felt like victory. Something changed when she no longer needed him. Not abruptly, not cruelly, gradually. She wanted to go out more, meet friends, feel normal. He understood, or thought he did. He stayed home more, rested, adjusted. She called rides instead of asking him to drive. It made sense. She didn't want to inconvenience him. At least that's what she said. There was one driver she mentioned more than once, always casually. "He's always available," she said once. "He's nice." It didn't register. Why would it? He was focused on healing, on adapting to a body that no longer felt like his own, on accepting that some sacrifices don't announce their consequences right away. The first sign wasn't betrayal. It was contrast. She came home glowing from nights out. He came home exhausted from days that felt heavier than they should. She talked about feeling alive. He talked about managing pain. They were moving in opposite directions. She stopped touching the scar on his side. At first, it had been sacred, a reminder. Later, it became uncomfortable. It reminded her of something she didn't want to carry anymore. One night, she said something without realizing what it revealed. "I just don't want my whole life to be about what happened." He nodded. He agreed. What he didn't say was that his life already was, because the surgery hadn't just changed his body. It had redefined his future. She could forget. He couldn't. The messages started after that, short, deleted, unimportant if you looked at them individually. Patterns form when you stop looking individually. He noticed the timing, the same hours, the same excuses. He didn't accuse. He waited. Waiting had become a skill. Then one evening she came home later than usual. She smelled like a night she hadn't shared with him. She smiled when she saw him, too easily. And in that moment, something settled inside his chest. Not anger, certainty. He didn't know who yet. He didn't know how far, but he knew this much. The part of her life that needed saving was over, and the part of his life that paid for it had just begun. Recovery does not end when the body heals. It ends when the past becomes inconvenient. At least, that was how it ended for her. Once the doctors stopped scheduling frequent checkups, her days opened up. Time returned to her like a gift. She filled it quickly. New routines, new places, new faces. She talked about it like rediscovery, like she had been given a second chance at life and intended to use every second of it. He listened, from the couch, from the kitchen table, from the edge of the bed when sleep came easier for her than it did for him. The doctors had warned him that recovery would be asymmetrical, that donors often struggled longer than recipients, that gratitude didn't always translate into patience. He had nodded at the time, confident that they were talking about other people. Now he understood they had been describing him. His body had changed in ways that didn't announce themselves loudly. Fatigue arrived early. Strength left quietly.
He had to stop exercising the way he used to, had to monitor what he ate, had to think before committing to anything physical. Every choice now came with calculation. Her body, meanwhile, seemed to forget the months it had spent failing. She moved with ease, laughed freely, made plans impulsively. She wanted to reclaim the time she felt had been stolen from her. He didn't blame her. How could he? Survival creates urgency, but urgency has no patience for those who move slowly. She began going out without him. First she asked, then she informed, then she simply left. "It's easier this way," she said once. "You need to rest." He appreciated the concern. What he didn't appreciate was how invisible he felt as it became routine. She used ride apps constantly now. It was convenient, efficient, and it meant she didn't have to feel guilty about asking him to drive when he was tired. There was one driver she mentioned more often than the others, always in passing, always without detail. He's nice. He knows the city. He's always available. The repetition felt harmless at first. He didn't imagine anything from it because imagination would have felt like betrayal of his own trust. Trust had been the foundation of everything he had done. Trust was why he had signed away a part of his body. Trust was why he didn't question small inconsistencies. But small inconsistencies don't exist in isolation. They collect. She began dressing differently. Not dramatically, just deliberately. More attention to appearance, more time before leaving. When she returned home, she carried energy with her. Stories that didn't include him, laughter that didn't linger. He told himself this was what independence looked like, that he should be happy she no longer felt fragile, that she no longer needed him the way she once had. But need leaves a vacuum when it disappears, and something was filling that space. He felt it before he understood it. A shift in tone. A change in rhythm. She no longer spoke to him as if he were part of her momentum. He was something stationary now, something she moved around. One night, she came home later than usual. Not drunk, not reckless, just late. She sat beside him and talked about the evening in broad strokes. No names, no specifics. She kissed his cheek and went to shower. He noticed she took her phone with her. That was new. He stared at the bathroom door, listening to the water run. He hated himself for the thoughts that followed, not because they were cruel, because they were obvious. When she came out, she was relaxed, light. He asked how she got home. "Same way as always," she said. He nodded. He didn't ask more. Asking would have meant acknowledging that something was wrong. And once you do that, you can't go back. The physical contrast between them grew more pronounced with time. She was radiant, healthy, unburdened. He was careful, measured, always aware of limits. They no longer shared the same pace. She walked ahead of him in public without noticing. Not intentionally. Naturally. He followed, not because he wanted to, because he couldn't keep up. The first time he felt truly replaced wasn't sexual. It was logistical. She mentioned casually that the driver had helped her carry groceries upstairs, that he had waited while she ran back inside for something, that he had made her laugh during traffic. He smiled politely. Inside, something twisted. Those were small acts, but small acts had once been his territory. He had been the one who carried things, waited, stayed. Now, someone else was filling the gaps left by his limitations. Someone without scars, without fatigue, without reminders of the worst year of her life. She didn't see it as replacement. She saw it as convenience. Convenience doesn't ask permission. He tried to talk to her, not about suspicion, about distance. He told her he felt like they were drifting. She listened, patiently. Then she said something that landed heavier than any accusation could have. "I don't want to feel like I owe you my happiness." He understood what she meant. He just hadn't realized she felt that way. Owing someone implies imbalance, and she was done living in imbalance. What she didn't say was that his body still carried the proof of their imbalance every day, that his fatigue was not philosophical, that his limitations were permanent. He stopped bringing it up. Silence felt safer than sounding like a burden. Weeks passed, then months. The messages on her phone became more frequent. Still nothing explicit, still nothing undeniable. But familiarity has a texture. He noticed it in the way she smiled at her screen, the way she angled it away from him without thinking. One afternoon, he watched her get into a car from the window. He didn't mean to. He was just standing there. The driver stepped out briefly to open the door for her. He didn't confront her right away. Not because he was afraid of the truth, but because part of him already knew it. There's a moment before certainty settles in. A brief, fragile space where denial still feels like protection. He lived there for a while. He told himself that suspicion was cruelty, that questioning her was unfair after everything she had been through, after everything they had been through. But denial has a cost, and like everything else in his life now, he was the one paying it. The first undeniable proof wasn't emotional. It was logistical. He noticed the pattern in the ride history. Same pickup points, same drop-offs, same times, the same driver, always the same. At first, it could be coincidence. Cities are small when routines form. But coincidence stops being coincidence when it repeats without variation. He didn't ask her. He didn't accuse. He watched. Observation had become his most reliable skill. One evening, she forgot to log out of her account on the tablet they shared. He didn't plan to look. He noticed the notification. A message preview. Short, casual, familiar. Let me know when you're ready. No name, no context. Just assumption. He closed the screen. He sat there for a long time, feeling the quiet pressure build behind his eyes. He remembered the hospital room, the paperwork, the signatures. He remembered the way she had looked at him when the doctor said, "perfect match." He wondered for the first time whether love had ever been the currency in that room. When he finally asked her, he did it gently, not that it mattered. "Are you seeing someone?" he said. She didn't react the way guilty people do in movies. She didn't deny. She didn't cry. She exhaled, as if she had been holding something back for a long time. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. That sentence had already become familiar to him. He asked who it was. She hesitated. Then she told him. The driver. Just that. No justification, no build-up. The words landed with a weight that surprised him, not because of who the man was, but because of who he wasn't. The driver hadn't been there during dialysis. He hadn't sat through consultations. He hadn't signed anything irreversible. He hadn't given anything up. He had arrived after, when she was healthy, when she was free, when she no longer needed saving. The contrast was brutal. He asked the question that had been tightening inside his chest for weeks. How long? She looked down. Not before the surgery, she said quickly. Never before that. She needed him to understand that distinction. She needed to believe it mattered. It did. Just not in the way she thought. So when? He asked. When I started feeling like myself again. That was the moment something broke cleanly. Not shattered, not violently. Clean. She explained it like a truth she had rehearsed, that she needed lightness, that she needed normalcy, that she needed someone who didn't look at her like a miracle that had to be protected. With you, she said carefully, I always felt like what it took. He understood then. He hadn't been replaced by a person. He had been replaced by an absence. The driver didn't carry history. He didn't carry sacrifice. He didn't carry memory. He carried nothing. And nothing, he realized, can be very attractive when you're trying to outrun the past. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He asked one question. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? She was quiet. Long enough for the silence to answer. I never asked you to give me your kidney, she said. There it was. The sentence that absolved her of everything in her mind and condemned him in his. She was right. She hadn't asked. She had simply stood still while he stepped forward. She had warned him, technically. I won't let you do this. But she hadn't stopped him. She hadn't refused. She hadn't walked away. Because she couldn't. Not then. He realized the truth wasn't that she had betrayed him. The truth was that she had outgrown him, and he was the price of that growth. The next weeks blurred together. She stayed out more often, came home less, sometimes not at all. When she did, she moved through the space like a guest who had already decided to leave. He noticed how little his presence affected her now. No tension, no guilt, no urgency. He had become background. One evening, he saw the car again. The same one. The driver stepped out this time. He waited by the door while she finished gathering her things. They laughed. Not loudly, comfortably. The kind of laughter that belongs to people who don't carry shared trauma. The driver looked at her the way people look at possibility, not history. She kissed him before getting him a car, not dramatically, naturally. Like this was the version of herself she was choosing to continue. The car pulled away. He stayed where he was. Not frozen, just still. Because movement requires direction, and his had been taken from him. That night, she didn't come home. The next day, she packed a bag, not in anger, in efficiency. She told him she needed space, that she needed to live, that she couldn't be the person she was becoming while staying in a place that reminded her of what she had been. She said she hoped he would understand. He did. Understanding doesn't prevent damage, it only explains it. As she walked out, he noticed how easy it was for her now. No hesitation, no weakness, no reminder of the months she couldn't stand without help. She walked past him like someone passing a chapter they no longer needed to reread. The door closed. He sat down. His body hurt in ways it always did now. A dull ache. A reminder. He placed a hand over his side. The scar was small, almost elegant. A permanent mark of a decision made without conditions. He finally understood the shape of the truth. He hadn't given her a kidney. He had given her an exit, and she had taken it the moment she could walk through it on her own. The first thing he noticed after she left was how quickly life stopped asking about it. People checked in once, maybe twice. How are you holding up? Are you okay? Do you need anything? And when he answered calmly, the question stopped. Because calm is often mistaken for closure. He didn't correct them. He didn't have the energy to teach anyone the difference between surviving and recovering. Besides, the hardest part of what happened wasn't something you could explain in a sentence. The hardest part was that nothing about his body could forget. Not the scar, not the fatigue, not the invisible limitations that shaped every day now. She could walk away from the past. He carried it inside him. In the weeks that followed, she sent messages that sounded reasonable. I'm not trying to hurt you. I just need to breathe. You deserve someone who isn't broken by the same memories. He read them once and didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. None of those sentences changed what mattered. A kidney donation isn't a gesture. It's a permanent rearrangement of a life. And permanence has a way of exposing what was real all along. His doctor told him the recovery would take longer than he expected, that his body would adapt, that he would eventually feel normal again. Normal. The word felt insulting. Normal meant forgetting. There was no forgetting this. Every time he climbed stairs too quickly and felt his heart pound too hard, he remembered. Every time he woke up exhausted after a full night of sleep, he remembered. Every time he said no to something he used to do effortlessly, he remembered. And then he remembered that she didn't have to. She got her normal back. He lost his. One afternoon, he saw her by accident, not in person, on a screen. A friend had posted a photo online from a restaurant opening, a group photo, bright lighting, smiling faces, and there she was. Blonde hair, perfect. Skin too smooth to be natural. A version of beauty that looked curated rather than lived. She was standing close to a man with dark hair and sharp blue eyes. The driver. His arm was around her waist like he belonged there. Like he had earned it. He stared at the photo longer than he meant to. First he felt nothing. Then he felt something cold settle into him. It wasn't jealousy. It was comprehension. This wasn't a secret relationship anymore. It was a replacement made public. A statement, not necessarily against him, but against what he represented. Sacrifice, memory, cost. The photo had a caption about new beginnings, about gratitude, about life being short. He closed the app and sat quietly, his phone face down. The world has a way of celebrating people who survive. It rarely celebrates the people who pay for that survival. A week later, she came to collect the rest of her things. She arrived dressed like someone who no longer lived near hospitals. No comfort clothing, no cautious shoes. She looked like a person who had been given her life back and had decided to spend it. The driver waited outside. He didn't come in. He didn't have to. His presence was already loud enough. She walked through the apartment, gathering items efficiently. She didn't linger. She avoided looking at the small details that still held her recovery inside them. The pill organizer in a drawer. The medical paperwork tucked away. Heated pads and bandages he had bought without thinking. He stood in the doorway of the living room, watching. Not because he wanted to stop her. Because he wanted to see if she would look at him the way she used to. The way she had looked at him after surgery, when she whispered, "You saved me." She didn't. When she finally looked up, her expression was composed, almost gentle. "I don't hate you," she said. He nodded. "I know. I know. I didn't plan any of this," she added. He almost laughed. Planning would have made it simpler. Planning would have meant intention. This was worse. This meant inevitability. He asked her a question he hadn't asked yet because he had feared the answer. "Do you ever think about what you took?" Her face tightened slightly. Not guilt. Discomfort. Like someone forced to acknowledge a truth they would rather keep abstract. "You gave it," she said. Her voice was careful, measured, as if she had practiced saying it without sounding cruel. There it was again. The logic that made her clean in her own mind. He didn't argue. He didn't tell her about the nights he woke up sweating, heart racing, convinced something was wrong inside him. He didn't tell her about the quiet fear that came with knowing his body had less margin for error now. He didn't tell her about how he carried his limitations in every decision. Because he understood something now that he hadn't understood before. Some people can only live forward if they never look backward, and he was too large a piece of her backward life. She picked up her final bag and hesitated near the door. For a moment, it looked like she might say something real, something human, something that wasn't a defense. Instead, she said, "I hope you find peace." Then she left. He watched her walk to the car. The driver stepped out, opened the door. She slid into the passenger seat without looking back. The car pulled away, and he stood there with the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels final. The months after were not dramatic. They were mechanical. Bills, doctor visits, diet changes, sleep that never felt deep enough. Life reduced itself to management. He kept working, he kept smiling when people told him he was a good man. He kept answering politely when someone mentioned her. "She's doing well," he would say. And technically, it was true. She was alive, healthy, whole again. That was the tragedy. Not that she had suffered, that she had been restored, and then had decided to erase the person who made restoration possible. One night, he sat alone and tried to name what hurt the most. It wasn't the image of her with someone else. It wasn't the public nature of it. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the lesson embedded inside the betrayal. He had believed that sacrifice created bond, that if you gave enough, love would become inevitable. But what he had really done was create an imbalance so large that it could only end one way. Either she would carry that debt forever, or she would run from it. Not because she was evil, because debt is heavy, even when it's emotional. Especially when it's emotional. The driver didn't carry that weight. He didn't carry the memory of machines in a hospital room. He didn't carry the smell of disinfectant. He didn't carry the fear of waiting for a phone call with test results. He didn't carry the scar as proof. He carried nothing. And to someone trying to rebuild a life without pain, nothing is the lightest thing in the world. He stood in the bathroom one morning, shirt lifted, looking at the scar. Small, clean, not heroic, not cinematic, just real. He thought about the moment he had signed the consent forms. He had been certain then, certain that saving someone would anchor them to him. Certain that love and loyalty were natural outcomes of extreme generosity. He understood now how naive that belief had been. Not because generosity is foolish, but because generosity doesn't control what people become after they survive. Sometimes survival doesn't create gratitude. It creates urgency, a hunger to live without reminders. And reminders often look like the people who stayed. He lowered his shirt and stared at himself. Then he whispered the truth out loud, not as a complaint, but as a final correction. He didn't lose her because he wasn't enough. He lost her because he was the cost. And in the end, that was the part he couldn't replace. She could replace the relationship, the house, the routine. She could replace him with someone who made her feel lighter. Not truly. Because even if she refused to remember it, her body would. Every breath, every step, every ordinary day she lived, it all had a hidden price. And the person who paid it would live with the consequences, quietly, forever. He turned off the light and walked away from the mirror. Not healed, not whole, but finally, painfully, honest.